7.1, and this is the business improvement district poll outcome. And we're getting Beth to. We've got a few illnesses today, so there will be different people presenting on these. But thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Kia ora, councillors. This report is just to provide an update on the poll outcome for the proposed establishment of the Business Improvement District. This would normally sit within the Commercial and Strategy GM portfolio. I was babysitting it whilst there was nobody in that place, but I'm just wanting to provide the update on the poll, answer any questions where I can. If not, I also have invited Di Hay to speak to any specific questions that I may be unable to answer.
Di, if you'd like to come to the front bench here, that would be much appreciated. Thank you, councillors. Do we have any questions in relation to this? It's reasonably emphatic in terms of the percentages. Councillor Pye.
Sorry, I just have a general question that I've asked before, but I still struggle to get my head around it. What is the bid going to do that is different to the City Hub strategy?
Specifically rating.
My understanding is that City Hub is a little bit more to do with infrastructure and council resourced issues. For instance, the paving stones, whereas the bid will become a promotional and advocacy group for the CBD property owners and businesses. So, for instance, in the strategic plan that we've developed, which was a requirement of getting the bid policy approved, within the first year, they're going to be looking at promotional and marketing plans for the area, but also advocacy in terms of if there are any things that the bid group as such wants to come to the council for to say, we see this as an issue, like inner city security, for instance, things like that. So it's not dealing with sort of the bricks and mortar of that is within the public realm, but the other side of it to help make our CBD as vibrant as possible.
So sorry, just to follow on from that. So and I may have this wrong, but I thought part of some of the City Hub, initially some of the trials were street markets, night markets, and so there still seems to be a bit of an overlap there. It may not be a question you can answer.
There has been. That's a reality. There has been. And the CBD group was formed in 2017 as a result of consultation with the stakeholders, which Venture Timaru was asked to do on behalf of TDC. So they started getting involved in markets and different activities for the benefit of the CBD. And then the City Hub came along, and I guess what happened was some of these trials that they wanted to do were different to try to gauge different things, like the one that focused on the arts. So it was just different ways of doing different things, but we were always doing what we were doing from the outset, and there were some discussions between the two groups about what had previously gone on.
Any further questions? You're fine.
Oh, thanks. Looking probably further to that, Councillor Pye, I think where City Hub in the short term has covered some of that funding on events and what have you, it's likely to then get picked up through the bid. And that funding, is only available for a short time, direct through council. So that would be my view. That gets picked up under the bid budgets. Would that be correct from your thinking?
If we can gain some funding to do it.
Yeah. So once the bid's through, I'm saying, yeah.
So at the moment, the next activity that the CBD group in the precursor to the bid is undertaking is a Matariki night market, and the CBD group applied to the Major Events Fund for funding for that. So going forward, one of the things that they will look at doing within the first 12 months really of their development is to work on funding streams in addition to the levy that would be imposed on the property owners too. So sponsorship is one that comes to mind, that they have always thought that would be something they would look towards, as well as applying to other grants and organisations to, for instance, run events.
Sorry, just out of interest, sorry, I haven't actually caught up through the information that's come through our business, but so what is the budget that you're think you'll get out of the bid? Is it 100K or is it a couple 100K?
It's less than that now, one sec, I think it's on 120. No, I don't have that bit in.
It's about 150.
Oh, 150, 120 to 150. It was scaled back a little bit.
Yes, again, councillor.
Sorry, just one more question for clarity. So if the bid goes ahead and gets established, the CBD group will disappear. Is that the plan? Right.
We've got a meeting tomorrow morning about how that will run. The bid needs an organisation that's actually running it, managing it behind the scenes. So the CBD group is already an incorporated, no, it's not, yeah, incorporated society. It is envisaged that that will be like behind the scenes running the bid. So it's kind of like the bid becomes the, trading as, the CBD group trading as. So just the mechanism for which it happens.
Yes.
So what are the steps now? Because it can't be rated until the next financial year, effectively. So, and then there's some work. The bid or the CBD group has to work alongside council to an agreed plan, agreed budget, those sorts of things, isn't it?
So my understanding is that the next step in the process will be to lodge a submission through the long-term plan process for the council to debate and determine whether or not a bid should be established and whether or not it will be established. And then activities will flow out from there. So at the moment, the CBD group has been following the processes outlined within the policy itself to determine whether or not it's feasible, and then the next step is the long-term plan.
If I may, Mr Chair, that's correct, because what it is, it's actually a new rate, and a new rate has to be consulted on through the special consultative procedure or process, which is the long-term plan. So that's quite right, and that's why it will follow its way through like a new rate, proposed rate, into the long-term plan from here.
Thank you with that. Councillor Booth.
Yeah, so therefore we won't be able to rate or start collecting funds until the start of the next financial year, providing it all goes through.
That's correct. The financial year you'd be able to do it would be 1 July 2024, correct?
So basically it's going to mean that there's going to be a democratically elected group of people who will be getting a targeted ring-fenced amount of money for the promotion of their district or their bid. So, and obviously that means that it'll legitimise the activities and another advocacy. Obviously that will feed into the city hub development. So because they'll be quite adversely will be affected. Obviously it provides a vehicle for the local business to take locally led initiatives. So and there's a little pool of money there that they can work with for the betterment of their businesses and area they operate in.
Absolutely. Councillor Whittington.
Just out of interest, Councillor Booth, when you say democratically elected, can anyone stand for it, or do you have to be a building owner, a business owner, and who gets to vote?
Yeah, it's really the members of the bid itself who are paying that targeted rate. They're all invited to participate in the group, and so they will be. There'll be an executive. There'll be people on and they will be elected in. A chairman will be elected, etc. And then they will go off and they will form an entity, and then that entity will employ someone on probably a part-time basis to represent and advocate on their behalf.
Sorry, so is that correct though? Because that would mean that a business owner that wasn't a landowner couldn't be a member of the group. Was that
Respond to that.
Yeah.
I think they can be. It's
Yeah.
people who have an interest within the central business area, that the people who had the vote through to determine whether we would meet the criteria of the policy were the property owners, but people who, for instance, became members of the CBD group, and then they wanted to go on to the bid representative group. Anybody could be it, whether they're a retail owner, whether they're a resident of the CBD, because they have a vested interest in the CBD, or they work in the CBD.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. And one, sorry, can I
Carry on,
pause
yes,
the microphone? One final question. So I think VT's done a lot of great work in that support. At that point of the bid being established, what's the role of VT with supporting the CBD/bid group at that point? And the reason I ask that is because because it's a CCO of council, and this is an advocacy group that will come to council, does it need that separation is where I'm coming from.
We're working this out at this time because, like, tomorrow we're meeting with the executive of the CBD group, a meeting just to, again, go through the policy and determine what the next steps are that are required through that. And then at the moment, VT has continued to have a facilitation role, and we imagine that we would have a support role going forward, because like we do for any of the groups that we have, whether it's the trade sector or the food processing sector or anything, we still think it's an important part of our community that we're supporting, and the businesses within that business community. So we're not quite certain where it would be, but there would be a line in between, so that as a CCO we wouldn't be, coming to the council on behalf of the bid/CBD group. It would be those representatives there would be advocating on behalf of them.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Someone like to move a note? Thank you, Councillor Parker. Seconder, Councillor Pye. All those in favour? Against? So moved. Let's move to report 7.2 on page 33 and policy program update. And Trudy, you're going to present that.
Kia ora koutou, councillors, your worship. So my apologies, due to staff illness, you're stuck with me for this one. So this is to give you an overview of the work that we have underway in our policy space, and to give you some perspective on what we have to put in place legally or that are required as part of our work to provide services to our community. So you'll note that we work both with internal policy and external policy. So some of them might be internally facing, but others will be externally facing across the community. We have a prioritisation schedule that the team put together, and that's attached for your reference. And we regularly, the team, report to our senior leadership team with what they've done throughout the week or anything that's for approval or going forward. We're coming into a time, and there's a report later in the meeting around long-term plan policies, and the long-term plan is always a good driver for reviewing our policies and seeing where we are. And I welcome any questions.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Pye.
Just the grey shaded boxes that says other. What is that? Because, for example, one's the councillor code of conduct for elected members that I thought would have been a green complete, and so just wondered what other
So
is.
it's just aligning. My understanding is that's governance, so it has some overlay with the policy team as well. So, if that makes sense. And the financial contributions comes with, that's got an overlay as well with finance, and depending on whether it does with planning as well.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you. I'm just looking at July 2022 to December 22, and none of them are behind schedule red, which for me, it's quite surprising knowing that where we are at now. I mean, ideally they were meant to be completed within those 6 months of 2022.
So, in a perfect world, they would be, and they, as you can see, if it's still with council or the senior leadership team for approval, it's got the orange. Mm-hmm. My understanding is the team are working very closely. We haven't got, when they developed this, it wasn't red. There may be some that have moved, but some may be in the review process. So it might be being reviewed, but this policy is still in force. So we've got a little bit of overlay, and it's quite common in a council for there to be policies that haven't been delivered perfectly on time due to the volume of work that comes in legislatively from central government as well, impacting that.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah. Yeah, Bill.
Question in regard to the enhancing Māori capacity contributors decision making. Is that a policy? Is that driven by legislation, or is that?
My understanding is that will be driven by legislation under our obligations. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Scott?
I was just wondering, would we be able to have that, the schedule sent out separately just up on the hub? Because it would be, it's,
Certainly.
yeah, it's good,
That's a
nice one
great
to
idea.
review. Thank you.
We can keep you up to date.
No, so noted. Happily move, thank you. Mayor Bowen, seconder. Councillor Shannon, all those in favour? For, against? Thank you very much, so moved. So we're going to report 7.3 on page 37. Financial report for the month ending April 2023, and again, Trudy, with the help of our Kōwhakari, to present that.
Kia ora, councillors. So you will note from the report we made a little bit of a change to the cover report, and I've noted that there is a slight error on page 38 where it's got a surplus from LTNZ, which was actually, or it should be a surplus rather than a deficit. You'll note we haven't changed the reporting framework from the previous month. We're working around that with our team to create an easier to understand and read reporting framework, and I am going to generously throw to Mr. Curran to take us through the financial results.
So generous.
Yeah, look, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. So, look, happy to take questions. The theme really here is that it's a pretty tough fiscal environment, and we're up against expenditure which is straining our budget. And in the meantime, the officers are on. Every officer really is looking down to the end of the year what absolutely doesn't have to be spent, what can we defer without compromising levels of service. But we are doing everything we can to manage those expenditure lines because actually what you're seeing here is in essence the effect of cost escalation across a range of our activities and budget lines. That is really the essence of it. I can answer individual questions that yourself or councillors may have, but that's really the essence of it.
Questions? Councillor Booth.
Well, okay, yeah, happy to answer that. So look,
I'll go back to you then.
oh, sorry.
I beat it to it. Sorry, Pete.
So,
Councillor Pennington, go ahead.
At the moment, we're 10 million overspent in operating. That's unlikely to be reduced, I would have thought, probably increased by the end of the year. Where does that money actually come from? Because we haven't budgeted. Does it come out of our savings or?
yeah, so when you, if I look at it, you're sort of looking at the 11.1 million. I'm on, I haven't got my page numbers here, but I'm on that front page of council performance at 30 April, and it's page 2 of the attachment. So I think it's page 41 of the overall agenda. And you're looking at the 11 million there, Councillor Piddington. Yeah. So that, that's right. Where does it come from? Well, the depreciation, sort of a bit more than half of it, is a non-cash cost. So that doesn't have to be funded at the moment, but we can't kid ourselves that at some point in the future it does have to be funded. But this year in the current year it's a non-cash cost, if you like, or provision. The other ones, so we're looking at those at the moment. we haven't quite, we haven't got quite to the end of the year, but it's likely we're going to go over. Where do they come from? Essentially, they come from reserves of council. If we can't put the brakes on to drag them back, which is what we're aiming to do.
I guess that's part of my question. So we're not going to fund the $5 million in depreciation. We're not going to take that out, save it, and put it somewhere else. We're just going to ignore that here. So just don't get it. That's the aim.
Yeah, no, that, look, this is a really, because if you, it's a really good finance question actually, and I'm just wondering if we've got our cash flows here further down, because there's a difference between, I'm just having a look to see whether we include the cash flow, and I don't think we do. It doesn't mean we're running out of cash, but what it means is that when we set out to balance our budget at the beginning of the year, we won't be there in terms of having revenue which is equal to or greater than all of our expenditure. Now, not all of our expenditure is in cash, and the main non-cash expenditure item is depreciation. So this year, what it tells us is if we don't do something to either curb our expenditure or increase our revenue going forward, eventually we will run out. Now, it's not going to be this year or next year, but eventually we will run out is the long, and I want to make it really clear. We're not insolvent. We're nothing like insolvent. We're hundreds and, we're so far away from that. But ultimately, what we're saying here is that cost escalation has been greater than our revenue, budgeted revenue.
Just one last question, then I'll let everyone else have a go. So the overspend we've got this year of 5 million or 6 million, excluding depreciation, has that been factored into next year's spending and our rates? Because if we have just grabbed it on last year and factored in, have we factored in those increases as well?
Another really good question. And the theoretical answer is yes, that we have aimed, and I'm looking here at Mr. Dixon, that in actual fact those, because a lot of them are in the infrastructure area, that those cost escalations have been captured into the budgets that we're putting forward for next year. And quite a bit of that reflects, and this is where it does get a bit complicated, but it does reflect that why we're needing to fund more depreciation, because we spend our depreciation every year and we do need to fund it. So that's why we're having to increase the rates so much, because actually we do have these higher costs, and the increase in depreciation is a reflection of those higher costs, because that's what we've got to go out and buy in order to renew and replace our assets. So the short answer is yes, but it's quite a complicated finance model to get there.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Booth.
I guess the recognition of that extra depreciation expense of 6.5, that was done in this financial year, that valuation. So would that not take effect as of the 1st of July for your next financial year, for your next rating season? So therefore, it shouldn't really be reflected in the current set of accounts?
The way I'd respond to that is to say yes, it should be, because what we're trying to do is map the expenditure as we know it's occurring, and we've done a revaluation, and we know, so that when we get to the end of this year, you will see in our financial reports that get audited for 30 June 2023, you will see that depreciation has gone up a lot. And so in the management reports, we're trying to inform council what has happened across the course of the year and where we're tracking. And we are going to be incurring a significant increase in our depreciation charge. So that's why we're estimating what is our best assessment of it at present, so that you as councillors are informed that this item is here. Because that in part helps inform the annual plan that you're developing at the moment, that you have got depreciation that you do need to cover, and you can see it's here and you can see it's real.
yeah, I guess that's, we're rating that ratepayer for that, and I guess that shouldn't actually occur until the actual season, or should I say the financial year. But anyway, okay, another question, the other expenses, 4.65 million unfavourable, corporate support at 824. It's quite substantial. Just roughly what's that made up of?
Sorry, councillor Booth, what page were you looking at?
$48.
Oh, yeah, so through that, but of course, look on the other side of, so the net variance, because corporate support has a 7 million revenue favourable variance. But on the expense side, down on, as you say, page 8, you've got where the costs are. And the costs are, as you can see, one of the major ones is the finance costs, which is 1.83 million, unfavourable, due to drawing of borrowings and so on. So there's a bit to unpick there, because overall we are getting more interest due to our interest rate swaps, but we're also paying more interest on our loans, so that's a big part of it. Look, IT services have been are unfavourable, as are the costs relating to professional fees, and you can see the variance there. So there's a range of factors. Now, if I just go back to IT, we could go and have a look at that, but it would be things like licence fees have gone up. It's whether, in terms of upgrades and so on, that we've been required to acquire, whether they're more than we've budgeted when we set the plan. So there is a range there for corporate support, but it's the net amount against, and you can see the expense line there, but it's got to be offset against the revenue, which is also greater than budgeted, but not, and this is the challenge we have, not as much as the expense line is up.
For instance, the commercial and strategy management, 276,000 unfavourable. Is that because we had a consultant doing something, or what? Why is that extra? Because we got more staff, or?
So there'd be a range, and undoubtedly, yes, we had someone who came and consulted to support the delivery of that work during the year, quite correct. But that also would cover off some of the work, such as our internal audit work, or when we get advisors in to give assurance around our tax compliance, maybe our any work we do to get assurance around expenditure probity and so on. That sort of thing would be in there as well. There'll be a mix of costs that have gone to make that number 276 unfavourable against budget. What we'll know at the end of the year is how much it is in total once we get to the end of the year.
Okay, and I guess just in the finance revenue, you've got, going back to page 38, you've got in there surplus 2.27 million, and related party debt, and who's that with?
What page?
So what page 38?
38. That would be, I would think, is TDHL. Would be the related party debt, I would think. There's an intercompany or an inter-entity balance, I can't remember the number, I have seen it, is it 20 million, I think, something like that, but I'd have to check that number.
paying 5% interest roughly on all our debt, which is 165 million, is it? At the moment. So,
So our total borrowings at this point are 205 million at April, but that's offset by cash of probably, or maybe 50 to 55 million dollars. Just at that date and time.
yeah. Yeah, so I guess, obviously while we're borrowing money, we're getting some return on the money that we've got. I mean, is that terribly, I mean, it's not as much as we're actually paying in interest, so I guess, should there not just be a simple finance line in there which says, actually, this is what our net interest number is? So taking into account you've got interest rate swaps there as a calculation, and then obviously the other thing is that we're looking, we need to be keep in mind that you want to go to 230 million debt, and the interest rates are probably going to be in the 5.7. Have we actually taken that into account? Because that's actually, every time you take on a bit of debt, it's actually at the new rate, isn't it? Well, I guess when you've got some cash in the bank and getting less than the money that you're borrowing to pay for that, okay, we haven't got any money in the bank because we've got net debt of 165 million. That's the bottom line. That's what I'm getting at. So it seems funny, we've got a report here that shows income streams from this, but then a debt coming out. And I mean, why are we doing that? Because it's just swings and roundabouts. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're paying a lot of money in interest, and we just simply need to know probably what that net interest number is for the rate pay.
So to that, and what we could do is look to introduce into the cover report what is the, if you like, the net interest effect and the net debt effect, so that readers, to answer your question, Councillor Booth, can get that understanding of what we are actually paying and what we've got in sort of a couple of lines once we take out all the adjustments for having cash at the bank or cash on hand, interest received and so on. So we could look to introduce that to try and bring that clarity. The reason we hold some of that cash is in the event that, for instance, as we heard today, if we get a major seismic event or some other major event, we want to be able to actually lay our hands and have cash on the spot that we can then go out and procure services without having to go through the exercise of borrowing money. So council has a policy, and I can't remember the numbers, but we maintain about 20 to 25 million of cash anyway, and we might at April have had some grant money come in or have held some money because there were significant payments to go out in regards to capital. It could just be because it's that cash point is just at that point, and if you were to go 2 or 3 days either side, it might have changed a bit because it's just a balance sheet at 30 April in that point in time.
Oh, I guess I'm just concerned at the amount of red ink all over our report, that's all. I'd like to see it simplified, and we need to know exactly what's going on. So I'm getting some good vibes from Trudy that perhaps that may change.
Absolutely.
I think, Councillor Booth, to your point, that's absolutely right, and what we've tried to do, and we are looking at it, but we equally want to be very careful that we don't not present information. But the line that sort of tells you, I think, is on page, is it page 2? And it does show, is it page 2? Yes, and it does show, you're quite correct, it shows that, it's not red there, but it does show that expenditure is greater than revenue, and that is a matter that Councillor was looking to address in its next annual plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pye.
The question about the roading, which is on page 39 of our report, it says that the roading is 2.3 million over budget relating to emergency works, and they're subsidised at 51%. So is that 2.31 after the subsidy? Because if it's not, I couldn't see where we were over budget on the income by a similar amount. There was some LTNZ subsidies, but they were only 733, and there seems to be a gap of about 800,000 there.
So that 2.31 million is the gross cost. So that, so there's a 51% subsidy that comes in at the revenue line to offset some of that cost.
So the at the revenue line, we're only 700,000 above budget, and if you gross that up, there's a gap of 800,000. So where's that?
The revenue is yet to be received from Wakatotahi at the moment. So it was due to be signed off a few months ago. Unfortunately, the person who was processing that died suddenly. So there's been a little bit of hiccup, but we're expecting another $1.5 million in revenue coming in.
Councillor Pillington.
Perfect timing, Andrew. Hey, page 47, waste minimisation. We've got an unfavourable balance, but I've got a question around where 529 below budget on fees and charges, which at 344k relates to waste collection bins. So what's happened there when we change? Who gets the money when we change suppliers that we lose 344k?
So I think from a governance point of view, the question, just to extend on that, has been that we have been discussing is, we a couple of years ago had a contract where we made significant savings, but within a couple of years we've now got a significant increase in costs, and our concern is that actually the contract a couple of years ago wasn't as good as it was made out to be, and that we're incurring some costs now, and I think we just want that lined up. Whether that is the case, there's been a mistake made at some point in the renewal of that contract, and we just need to be transparent around that process and understanding that if there is a cost now, that yes, let's acknowledge that there was a mistake made, and this is why the costs have increased, because we just sort of been kicking this around a little bit and don't have full transparency.
I can answer that one. It's a bit of a long story, so just bear with me. Basically, when the LTP was developed and the new contract costs were put in, it was taken as a split between, so curbside collection costs were to be a targeted rate against those people, road ratepayers who received the service. The landfill itself was considered as a district-wide public benefit, and that was to be covered partially by a component of the general rate. In the LTP process, that never happened. So there was only the targeted rate. The general rate component didn't actually go through. To counteract that loss of revenue, the fees and charges were put up as a balancing figure, effectively. So the fees and charges have been overstated, but we have, in fact, gone pretty close to where we intended to, were hoping to be. If you notice too that the cost, yes, the curbside collection costs are over, but if you go drill down, and you won't be able to see it on these figures, but in my figures you can, is that the landfill costs have actually are $2 million under. So it's just the way the costs were distributed is the issue. We are still saving money, and in fact, it just as an extra added bit is that the good practices of the current contractor has increased the landfill life by 3 years since the start of the contract. So there's certainly gain to be made there.
That kind of makes sense, but why do you give the explanation we've lost 344k due to the bin income no longer being receivable?
That was an internal charge. We used to, charge the contractor for the bins in which we actually own, so they thought it was a rental charge. When we developed the new contract, we said, well, that's just an internal charge that's not required. It's a nonsense. So that was withdrew. But again, that because the contract was basically set up right at the time of the LTP, there were a few things that didn't get carried through into the LTP, which have now been corrected. So next year's annual plan is much more reflective of the true costs.
Just one more question. Just one more question quickly that confused me, if I can. Page 43. Vehicle management revenue is 222 a year unfavourable. What does that relate to, B? Page 43 of 61.
That's an internal charge as well, I believe, Andrew. The vehicle revenue.
Oh, vehicle revenue.
Through the fleet. I think it's an internal charge where we recover. So there's a lot.
That's right, we recover it. Yeah.
We recover vehicle revenue from different. It's almost like an overhead, but we recover it from different areas of the business. So it's not actually revenue external to the organisation. It's not like we're running a rental fleet or anything like that. It's an internal charge, and probably is unhelpful in terms of management reports where we're trying to report the council from an external perspective.
It's a timing issue, and those charges are put through at the end of the financial year.
Too many of these numbers don't, for me, have an explanation about where they sit. You know, it'd be handled internal charge balanced at the end of the year. Because then when I read that, I think, oh, no problem, I know what it's about, versus things that I should be concerned about, if that makes sense.
I just have another question on page 40. So the urban water, it says the costs are above budget by 645k, and it says what it includes, but it doesn't say the why. So is it because chemical costs have gone up, or is it because we've used far more water than we budgeted for and it's just cost us more to deliver that, or why? Because that's quite a large number to be outlined.
Yeah, probably the main reason would be increase in power costs have come through, increase in chemical costs, but also we have more treatment plants now than we did before.
Thank you. Actually, just a follow-up from Councillor Piddington's point. There's probably a few things that maybe we do some FAQs for elected members just in regard to some of these statements, and that might be helpful rather than actually needing something on every one, but it gives us an opportunity, and maybe we do a workshop and educate ourselves on some of those things. I just wanted to make a point, and it's sort of related to Councillor Booth's point around debt, and I think it's a really valuable one, and I do support it. You know, an interest line, I think that's really valuable. But one of the things I think we need to probably challenge ourselves around financial strategy and comfort level of debt is where that sits, and just remembering part of our business is utility provision, and you know that with utility provision you do have considerable debt to invest in the asset, and I think maybe with a long-term plan it would be good for us when we look at that, and we'll talk about this another day, but we look at our level of debt versus utility and our level of debt versus community infrastructure and just get a bit of an idea on where our comfort level sits on that. But one of the key things I want to make, and it was just your language, Councillor Booth, that you said you directed at the CE and the officers, and I think we've just got to be really mindful that this is we are in positions of governance, and we sign off these budgets, we sign off the LTP, we sign off financial strategy, the level of debt, all those sort of things. So collectively, when we sign these things off and we make those decisions, we have to own it. We have to own the red ink sitting in these, and if we've got more questions about better reporting and those sort of things that we want to challenge the officers on, that's really fine. Comfortable with that, but we do have to own these things that are in front of us, and we do need to be on a road of constant improvement, and I think we are heading there, and I think we've got some great elected members that are challenging everyone and challenging officers this term, which I think is fantastic, but we do need to take ownership for what's in front of us. Thank you. Sorry, no question.
Thank you. Any further questions? I do think we need to again get back to, as mentioned by Councillor Booth, and with our commission strategy manager, we're looking at doing some changes there that will start to extrapolate this out so that it is potentially more readable, but also we just need to strike that balance that where we're not sure of these things, can we please get those questions lined up in an email? So, I mean, today was classic because we had sickness and everything, but thank goodness we've had people to stand in the breach and almost answer these questions straight off the cuff. So we just if we can strike that balance, we'll obviously have an evolution of change around reporting. That's going to give us a lot more narrative, which is really true, Councillor Piddington, which you mentioned. But also, can we get some of these questions nice and early in there, so that the information is real time and it's the right thing as opposed to potentially. With that in mind, receive a note. Someone like to move that? Councillor Jackson, thank you very much. And a seconder? Yes, Mayor Bowen. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Move to 7.4, long-term plan 2024-34 overview on page 54. And again, we're getting Trudy to kick this off for us.
Well, I'm not as talented as Vincy, so I do need to declare that first of all, because she would have made this really engaging, so I'm trying to follow in her footsteps. So first of all, a long-term plan is not something that is a staff members or officers, it's actually yours and the community's. It's a really exciting time to be a part of in this triennium, that you get to set the direction for the next 10 years. And we start that next week with some workshops that we have scheduled to take you through for the start of that. But today is about we're wanting to engage with you on the process going forward. What are our legislative requirements of a long-term plan, which are laid out in there. We talk about, we'll be bringing to you our activity management plans, because that allows you to have a really good level of service conversation about what it'll mean for your communities in terms of what we deliver and what we're aiming to deliver in the long term. It also is a process that's led by the Mayor, and we'd encourage you today to think about if you'd like to have one of the proposals or recommendation is to have a working group of full councillors who are engaged with our project team. And also thinking about our engagement with our community. This is the time to think about how can we innovate, create and make a space to hear the different and diverse voices that exist in our community. It's one of the biggest consultations that we engage with from a council perspective, and one of the most important, because it's a chance to hear, it's a chance to listen, and it's not just about us facilitating, we'll put a piece of paper out and see if anyone submits. Engagement can be you connecting with different groups, it can be different groups connecting with you, it can be visiting a farmer's market and having a stall. All of those options are available. LTPs, they really provide a chance for council to connect with community about what the expectation is going forward. They're really interconnected with, of course, the budget and what's our strategy for our infrastructure and financially going forward. We will have a reference group that we're proposing today that we'd like some members to be a part of, and we've put down there on page 56 the different workshops we'll work through. Next week's workshop is almost like a long-term plan introduction for those of you who are new, but we welcome anyone else to come along just as a refresher, and it will be open to the public and community board members as well. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? So in terms of the option, and we're looking at potentially having an LTP reference group of elected members, what numbers we're talking about there? 4?
If we could get 4, that would be, and they're able to connect in with you as a group.
Indeed. So, yeah, Mayor Bowen.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea, not taking away that, LTP is something that we all need to be, very involved with. But my challenge to elected members would be just, I know there's some that are more involved than others on certain groups, etc. So it might be an opportunity to get some balance around the table with those that are involved less on some of these things. So just to really share the workload, and I think that's probably important if you're going to put your hand up.
So we'll call for nominations first. So Councillor Shannon, you've already indicated you'd like to. Councillor Oliver. Councillor Jackson, and one more. And Councillor Booth. You're there. I think 4 is a good number. The distribution of males in that group is probably quite high. So that shouldn't be a thing, maybe. But at least you're sitting next to someone who might be able to help you through this, Councillor Shannon. Brilliant. Okay, so we'll note those nominations.
Yeah, so it's Shannon, Oliver, Booth, right?
Oliver, Jackson. Yep, perfect. Do we have to move those? Yeah, we'll actually move those as nominations. Councillor Parker and Councillor Scott. Those in favour? Against, so moved. So we'll.
So we're going there with option 2.
Yep, option.
Or the,
Yeah.
let's take a step there.
Yeah, so recommendation was, for establishing that LTV reference group. So we're happy with that. So without any other questions, we'll get like someone to move to receive and note that LTV paper. Thank you. So Councillor Parker and Councillor Booth, thank you. All those in favour? Against? So moved. So we move to matters of an urgent business, and I flagged earlier on that we did have one from Councillor Scott. So I'll call Councillor Scott to talk to that proposal.
I just wanted to raise my concerns around our project management of our vertical builds and our strategy for achieving that. I have put forward several times that we need to consider a project management division, team, office. I'm just saying all those words because I'm not quite sure what that actually looks like. But we have some significant work to do when it comes around our vertical builds. Theatre and heritage, our stadium, art gallery, we will have the airport. We've got heaps of projects on the go. And I feel that we don't have the expertise internally at this time to deliver those projects concurrently. And we're putting so much pressure on our current resources to develop and bring these projects to this table, but also to our community, that we're not achieving those. And I'm really concerned for the well-being of our staff at the moment to be able to deliver these projects for our community. And I would really like to consider, what does that look like if we build an internal team to deliver these, to support our current resources. But it's a significant role. It's financial, it's the capability to deliver on vertical builds and to be able to sequence those appropriately. So I want to raise that in this forum because I have raised it several times at other tables and now I want to bring it to the council.
Okay, further to that discussion, Councillor Piddington.
Yeah, look, I'd like to support Councillor Scott on that. I think our staff are under pressure, some are overworked, and we just load more work onto them. So there's 2 things I'd like to say is it could be funded out of the project, so we don't have to have a debate about where the money comes from, because I'm sure if we do this right, we'll save a fortune on time, money, and other things. And the second point I'd like to make is it needs to be at the appropriate level, which I see at senior management team level, reporting direct to the CEO, not falling under someone else that will slow the process down again. It needs to be a separate role someone with the expertise to drive these projects and really support our other staff involved. So
Okay,
happy to support that.
further discussion, councillors? I think obviously, Mayor Bell?
Yeah, look, I think it's, you know, certainly worthy of at least a conversation. I think it's a space where we did really well in regard to the horizontal infrastructure for some time, and we have sort of over-delivered in that space, and it's worked really well when we had really good program delivery and those sorts of things. And this vertical build time has really hit us, and I think it's probably confirmed that we don't necessarily have the skill set, or not necessarily the skill set, but I think it's the capacity. I think to Councillor Scott's point, we're just loading the same people with a lot of workload. So I would support a conversation on just how we can do this better.
So we need to further that. I need a resolution or some framework that maps that out and what that looks like. Yeah, cool.
Oh,
Harry.
thank
Go for it,
you.
Harry.
Through you, Chair, and can I thank you, Councillor Scott, and other councillors for raising it and acknowledging the workload and the demands and the expectations, because they are real, and the way that these projects are delivered to time, budget and quality specifications is by having really good control over them via project management from beginning to end. So we really appreciate that, and I think for us to advance that discussion, I think, because it's something we as a leadership team have also traversed and canvassed, and trying to work out what is the way to position it and what it looks like, so that we, to use your words, we don't want to interject just layers that slow things up. We want it to be something that creates a very streamlined process where there's visible, tangible disciplines and control evidencing the progression of these projects, which all of them will have their challenges and complexities. I think what would be potentially a good way for us, and I put it out here simply to start, is that officers who have done some thinking on this are charged with bringing back either to the committee or to a council committee of some sort, because time is of the essence, some sort of a proposal of what it could look like for that to then be debated and discussed and given either refinement, shape or progress subject to various amendments would be my suggestion, because I think I'd want to discuss it and see where we got to, but two people who are keenly interested in it and the leadership team are here and may wish to comment on it as well, but that would be broadly, we come back with something to a committee, and I don't think we'd have to wait forever. We don't need a project manager for that. We can do that ourselves. we can. We've got some thinking. We'd be able to manage that, but and bring it. But it would be to another committee because we want to keep it moving.
Sorry, Ben.
Oh, beg your pardon. Oh, that's lucky for them. Hearing me is probably bad enough. Seeing me would be worse. But I'd let my colleagues pass any comments. But thank you. We genuinely appreciate it being raised. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I do have to acknowledge the resource issue is one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we're having in delivering these particularly large infrastructure projects. And I think too that you just need to be recognised that the quantum of Council's capital works program has grown immensely. You know, I remember 5 years ago we were running around 35 million, and now running at 80 plus million. And we are doing a lot of large community projects in a very short space of time. So I do agree that we do need to scope some additional resourcing to ensure that delivery, because we are at the moment potentially breaking some people to get in there. So thank you for the consideration.
Right, Judy, thank you.
I just really appreciate the feedback and suggested proposal. We obviously have to work through a process, and we're really committed to that, and just being really mindful that because it could impact people down the track and things like that, we do the process in public excluded because it involves employment matters.
I don't see it that impacting, because what we're looking at is how we can shape a team, really. So it's not, I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about actually a new structure. I mean, not as in your current people structure, about how we're going to deliver these projects. So it's just a concept, and so I would hate to trigger anything that is going to cause anyone issues. So it's just a concept at this stage that I'd like to see progressed, and I'm more than happy to be involved in that as a reviewing draft documents. More than happy to be involved at that level if you see value in that.
Mayor Bowen.
Look, just as a suggestion, it probably best fits, and happy to be challenged on this, but it probably best fits with people in performance, and I think we just make sure that everyone is got that in their diary. So, yeah, if everyone's comfortable with that.
So to move this now, because it's a matter of urgent business and it's not linked to a paper, we'll need a resolution as to knowing exactly what that looks like in terms of landing a statement.
Yeah, quite correct. Yeah, Mr. Chair, because it is a matter of urgent business, it's an item with a resolution, and is it suggested that the resolution is that officers are tasked with preparing a scoping a proposal for a project delivery team, if I call it that, and we use those very generically and broadly. It's a project delivery team to be reviewed by elected members. There is a People and Performance Committee next week, which is probably, I think it's next week, is it? Geez, I think it is the 20th, which would probably be a bit short for us to get it, but there's nothing to stop that committee having a meeting called in between other ones. So we would simply scope a proposal for a project to look at the resourcing, capacity and capability of project delivery.
Thank you. Happy with that, Councillor Scott? Any other discussion, Councillor Piddington?
Would the councillors that aren't on people and performance be added? We've been told several times we would be, but I've still had nothing.
I think there's through you, Mr. Chair. I think on that there's a standing invitation for them to attend, and I think on this we're just notifying that it is. Right. Oh, okay. Right. Well, okay. No,
It's always a pitfall, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, all our meetings are on the website, so they are all there, but I think...
There's Peter and your council.
Jess, if you could just pick up that as action. Thanks.
Okay, I don't think there's any further discussion in relation to that. So we'd sort of like to move that resolution. Are you happy that you've... Yep. Perfect. You'd like to move that, Councillor Scott, and the seconder over here, Councillor Piddington. Thank you. All those in favour? Again, so carried. And we have no other further business, so I'll call the meeting at a close at 1:17. Thank you.